Joining me to talk about the ongoing terror threat this July 4th weekend and beyond is CNN national security commentator and former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers. Also with us is former CIA Director Jim Woolsey. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Congressman, let me start with you. Why are the warnings coming from law enforcement and the national security apparatus so much louder than we usually hear before a holiday weekend?
Again, there's a whole series of things that they'll check off in trying to make this assessment. And so they don't have anything clear and concrete. So caution good, hysteria bad. What they were doing, error on the side of caution. They know that there's a lot of bad guys that they know they watch are talking to each other in a way that's concerning. But again, they don't have anything specific. But when you take that, you take the call during Ramadan by a significant player in ISIS, that they'll get extra bonus points, if you will, if you do a terrorist act during Ramadan. You add that to your layer, and then you just keep going down at all the places and all the hot spots they check. And somebody in those meetings decided, hey, we just need to be extra cautious to get people to pay attention. But again, caution good, hysteria is not good.
Jim, let me ask you, we're going to see a lot of evidence of a more muscular, visible law enforcement presence. Dogs, law enforcement officers, radiation detectors, that sort of thing. As a former director of the CIA, what sort of thing are we not going to see, but that also will be increased this weekend?
Well, the thing that's really important, I think, is that ISIS is sending out 90,000 tweets a day. And back in the 80s, Albert Wohlstetter wrote a piece about solidarity in Poland called "The Facts Will Make You Free," F-A-X. Mm-hmm. It was telling Solidarity that if they could communicate outside what the Soviets could see, they could really make some changes. And social media change, when it changes and a lot more people come into it, it tends to affect what people do. And I think one of the main things that's happening here is that ISIS is so much into the social media that instead of, they don't need to get together, they don't need to talk on the phone with one another, they do sometimes, but what they're doing is using the social media to instruct people in terrorism, to radicalize them, and it is as big a difference from what went before as the fax machine was from mailed newspapers.
Congressman, I want you to take a listen to this. It's John Miller, Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence and Counterterrorism at the NYPD. This is what he had to say this morning.
Well, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but the ISIS factor with the use of social media just makes the haystack that much bigger.
Now, by CNN's count, in June, there were 8 suspected ISIS-inspired jihadists arrested. Just in June, nearly 50 this year alone. At the end of the day, the public should probably be preparing itself, don't you think, for the fact that somebody's going to slip through the cracks. I mean, it's just inevitable. They can't stop everything.
Well, and that's right. We've always said that, listen, there is always the odd chance that they don't catch something, or somebody becomes self-radicalized and does their lone wolf act, or they operationalize one person, which limits the opportunity to intercede in an event like that, like you saw overseas, especially Tunisia. So, yes, the probability is, given that ISIS has said that they want to conduct a terrorist attack or have someone on their behalf conduct a terrorist attack in the United States, that sometimes that's going to happen. Now, remember, if they're operational the day before 4th of July, they'll take that opportunity. If it's on that day, they do it. Or if it's 2 months from now, whenever they get to where they can get an operation up and off the ground, they'll take it. They like to center around anniversaries, but they'll do it by the tempo and the preparedness of that particular operation. So that's why you have to be cautious about every holiday being a target. Yes, we know that. But that doesn't mean that they're operationally ready for those dates to actually pull off an attack.
Are you more concerned, as somebody who used to be in charge of the security of this country as director of the CIA, are you personally more concerned about ISIS-inspired lone wolves in this country, or an actual operational plan from Al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula, or one of those groups?
The lone wolves aren't very lonely. This is all a mass undertaking from ISIS. And the key thing about ISIS is that it has a caliphate, a small one, but they want it to be bigger. They have a country, and they can get people to come to it. They can get young women to come to marry the young men who are going to be terrorists and so forth. It's a very different thing than just a terrorist group. And it's much more dangerous. And I think we are not going to succeed in dealing with terrorism here until we take on, hopefully with the Kurds and some others, we take on ISIS in that part of the world and knock out the caliphate.
So you think that we should have a more aggressive response to ISIS in the caliphate of Syria and Iraq? Do you think we should have U.S. boots on the ground fighting the war?
I think we ought to have local Kurdish and other boots on the ground. We ought to send them weapons instead of sending them through Baghdad and having them all stolen from the Kurds. I think mainly what we ought to do is have forward air traffic controllers, the way we've had in other times. We were flying sometimes hundreds and sometimes thousands of sorties a day in some of our earlier operations, such as in Kosovo and at the beginning of the first Gulf War. We're flying now sorties 10, 12, 16, and two-thirds of them, they won't drop their ordnance. It's ridiculous. So I think you really need to use air power massively against the caliphate together with local troops, and we ought to have some advisors in there helping the local troops and helping guide them and teach them and so forth. Mm-hmm. But we're not doing anything very effective in that part of the world at all.
Congressman, that's the response from Jim Woolsey about what he thinks we should be doing abroad. What about here at home? Is there anything that law enforcement, intelligence should be doing that they're not doing?
No, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Just remember, the points of concern have gone up. So that means that there are more people active, engaged with ISIS in some way because of social media primarily across the United States. That's why there's an open case in all 56 FBI field offices, meaning somebody in every one of those regions of support has either contacted ISIS, expressed an interest in ISIS, or ISIS has expressed an interest in them. So the problem with what we have is just, can we keep up? Do we have the right amount of resources that allows us to keep up with this threat? That's why Director Woolsey is so right. If we don't start doing some disruptive behavior where they plan, finance, recruit, and launch their propaganda campaigns, this is going to be a very long war indeed, and we're going to come out on the losing end of it.
All right, Congressman Mike Rogers, Jim Woolsey, thank you so much. Appreciate both you being here. Hope you have a safe and happy 4th of July.